Good evening once again, everybody. Tonight I'm pleasantly surprised to be doing a review for you for the Power of the Prime's Voyager Wave 1 assortment. Didn't think I'd get these so soon, but managed to get lucky today at a local Toys R Us. So the Wave 1 assortment for Power of the Primes consists of Starscream and Grimlock. So we're going to, go ahead and take a look at each of these guys and their respective modes, as well as their combiner configurations. These figures have been two of the more divisive of the toy line so far, and we'll kind of get into some of the reasons why that is. We'll start off with Starscream. So this is his very standard jet mode. It's got the typical Starscream colors of the gray, red, and blue. It's got his little null rays here, some landing gear right there, and then something that may not look familiar, for other iterations of the character, are these big old black things hanging off. And these are his Prime Master armor pieces. And we'll kind of get into all the functionality that these have here as we go through the review. So, I mentioned these are divisive figures, and I'm going to be pointing to some of the reasons why they are so divisive. One thing, Starscream, as you can see, is covered in these foil stickers. More hardcore collectors are not fans of these stickers. People like them, and even myself, typically prefer tampagraphs, which are much less prone to wear and tear. And then the other issue is that stickers tend to be pretty sloppily applied. And if you look, my copy isn't terrible. Definitely got some issues, like how the sticker partially covers this little slot right here. So your mileage will vary on these though. Alright, and then another big problem for me with this jet mode is if you look here, the rear section is split, and there's not really anything you can do about it. Because if you look right here, in a very glaring design flaw, they have pegs on both of these panels which press against each other and prevent this from really fully staying shut. I'm sure there's just some oversight on the designer's part, but it is pretty glaring and makes the jet mode look pretty silly and not well thought out. Other than that, he's very kibbly on the bottom. I mean, you just got his whole robot mode right there for the world to see. Alright, we'll talk about these black pieces. They're attached under the wings. That's kind of their storage spot. You don't have to put them on there if you don't want them making the jet look all weird and clunky. So these pieces that come with the Voyagers serve multiple purposes. They are meant to hold the figure's Enigma of Combination piece. We'll get a look at that. And each Enigma is similar but different. They are unique sculpts. Come in their own colors. Every Voyager is supposed to have one. So these can be held in there, like so. These are also designed to hold Prime Masters. So, got Vector Prime here. You go ahead and plug them in just like the Enigma. And that's the Voyager's way of kind of receiving the power-up from the respective Prime there. In their robot modes, these will serve as kind of buckler or gauntlet weapons that will attach to their arms in some fashion. And then in their combiner modes, these become the feet, which can be supplemented by deluxe class hand pieces, which we'll see here later. Alright, I've gone and transformed Starscream into his robot mode. Taking one glance at him, you can tell who this character is. He, kind of hits all of the major Starscream cues for the classic look of the character. This figure's gotten a lot of criticism. One, mainly for his proportions. He kind of has these really big feet. He has what a lot of people said by looking at pictures, these kind of Popeye arms. Got a tiny head. He's also kind of got these very bright colors that kind of makes him look more like a younger child's toy. something along the line of like Rescue Bots or, Imaginext toys. And I can see the criticisms. I do agree this isn't my favorite version of Starscream ever. If I had to pick between him and the Combiner Wars leader class, I would choose that one in a heartbeat as far as, his robot mode and even the jet mode. He's pretty kibbly on the back here. Got the nose cone hanging out. The wings, you can have them flat and running at a 90 degree to, his body for a more standard look, but I like to have him bent back a little bit. Kind of provides him some elbow room. He's got his null rays attached to his upper arms, like normal. He's got all the standard articulation you come to expect from a Generations Voyager. Head looks around, all that stuff. His head sculpt, I find very underwhelming. It's just kind of very blank, emotionless. There's no smirk. There's no sign that like sets him apart from just any other Seeker as like the scheming Starscream. I really don't like how they put the stickers here over his vents. If you run your finger over it, you can tell that the vents are sculpted in. And for some reason they decided to cover them up with these weird circle things. I will say I don't hate his forearms as much as many people do, but I think it's just a matter of getting the thing in hand. Pictures aren't always very clear, but once you can really see the sculpted detail, the little kind of armor plating here is more distinct from his actual forearm, so he doesn't come off looking like Popeye. But, for just a little Voyager-sized Starscream, he's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not crazy about his proportions. I wish they wouldn't have made his feet so big and dorky looking. For anyone that reads the IDW comics, this toy is what Starscream's current design is based off of. And his portrayal in the comics, he actually has the slitted vents up here on his shoulders. So I'm not sure when they made that change. Probably sometime after the artist, used it as her reference point. I wish they would have kept it. Looks a lot better. All right, this is how you attach Starscream's buckler things to his arms. They have little fold-out handles that you can use to attach them where the null rays normally go. And then you can attach the null rays to the bottoms of these. So now he just kind of has really large, cumbersome null ray cannons. It looks a little silly compared to the more standard configuration of his guns, but it is a good way to allow for storage of his buckler pieces without being too silly looking. I mean, they're not the worst looking thing ever, and considering his null rays are pretty small and underwhelming on this toy, kind of does some good to bulk him up a bit. Here's Grimlock in his well-known T-Rex mode. This toy is the first retail kind of redesign we've had of the original figure. Not counting the Masterpiece figure there. He does a good job of, hitting kind of all the major cues of, what makes a G1 Grimlock. Obviously the bucklers being attached to his feet are just storage. They don't have to stay there. So you can go ahead and remove them, because they do look weird hanging off his legs there. So yeah, at a quick glance, he looks like the original Grimlock. So when you start really kind of eyeing him closer, that you notice, kind of some issues with him. One thing he draws a lot of criticism for is he's got these tiny little nubby toes on his dinosaur feet, which they don't look like he'd ever be able to stand up. He'd just kind of fall forward all the time, no balance. I don't know why they did this, why they made his toes so small. I have a feeling that it comes down to cost concerns. For them to have toes that were on a hinge that could kind of fold away in his robot mode to not block his fists or anything would have been more expensive. So I think Hasbro just kind of took the cheap way out and just gave him really tiny toes that aren't in the way. So it looks dumb. It's not a huge detail. I'm not going to let it, ruin the toy for me, but it is pretty noticeable if you know what Grimlock's supposed to look like. The head is, spot on. It looks really good. He's got his little arms on ball joints here, so you can kind of move them around however you want. Got a lot of foil stickers, which on him looks a lot better than it does on Starscream. They're used more sparingly. They don't have these just giant stickers covering everything. And they just work better, in my opinion. He uses the same clear plastic with gold paint underneath that the other Dinobots in the line use. He's got this bit on here, which is part of his combiner gimmick, that does look very out of place, pretty noticeable. His legs are really far apart, way more so than the original toy, and it does look kind of goofy. Obviously doesn't look realistic to the proportions a T-Rex should have. And his tail is also very, very wide and flat. So, even though I don't hate this mode, I do like it. It looks good overall. I think this is the mode that really suffers most due to them trying to fit so many different things into one toy. Here we've got Grimlock's robot mode. Right off the bat, I will tell you this is my favorite mode for the toy. I think it hits every point that you need to hit if you're trying to say, hey, this is classic Grimlock. He really just, he's almost point for point the same toy, right? He's got the little wings in the back that have the arms hanging off. The T-Rex head is folded back. He's got the broad gold chest, the arms with the little T-Rex toes on the wrist there. Legs are made up of the dinosaur tail. He does have the very noticeable combiner cod piece there on his butt, but it's a little more forgivable for this mode. You can attach his bucklers to his forearms like so. Kind of gives him this real brawler appearance, like he's about to go put the beat down on somebody with these big things. Unfortunately, these are the only weapons the toy comes with. That's one big issue people have with this figure, is that Grimlock is known for carrying a sword around, and this toy doesn't have that sword or any other handheld weapon for that matter. They've just reduced him to strictly a melee character, which to me just seems cheap and lazy, kind of like the Tiny Toes thing. I feel like Hasbro and Takara, they had the ball, got almost to the goal, and then just dropped it right at the very end with the last few details. So it's disappointing. I hate to see when budget constraints really hinder a toy, but that's all I can imagine it is. I can't bring myself to believe that Hasbro's like, you know what? I think the toy would be better without a sword. I think it would be better with Tiny Toes. So, those are my main frustrations with the figure. But like I said before, this robot mode I'm very fond of, despite the missing sword and everything. It just looks so good. Alright, got the two of them together in the robot modes, just so you can kind of see how they scale together. Starscream does seem to be very slightly taller than Grimlock, which should kind of stand out to people that are familiar with the characters. Grimlock is supposed to be a pretty large transformer. So Starscream, he's smaller than I thought he was based on the renders, which for him is a good thing. It means he will scale better with characters that he's seen side by side with frequently, like Windblade. Grimlock is also smaller than I expected him to be, but in his case that is not a good thing. He is pretty glaringly undersized for the character that he's supposed to be. Not only is he shorter than Starscream, but if you put him in his T-Rex mode and put him up to a deluxe class figure from this very line, he's going to be shorter than that figure. Which, it's unavoidable. I know that trying to keep scale consistent in the Transformers toy line is impossible, but I do feel they could have made this toy bigger. A lot of people talk about, why did they make Predaking the upcoming Titan class combiner instead of having the Dinobots be that? They should be bigger theoretically. And I agree with that. But I also think that's only looking at it from a collector's perspective, from somebody that wants some semblance of scale with their toys and, want to be able to enact that Dinobots versus Devastator fight. But from a sales perspective, I think I can kind of understand why the decision was made to put the Dinobots in a cheaper size class, more accessible to kids because kids love dinosaurs. Anyway, enough of my rambling. We are going to go ahead, change these guys into their torso modes, and look at their combiner forms. Here we've got the character cards. This is Starscream's, obviously. This particular card has the Vector Prime symbol on it. So, it gives you Vector Starscream, which can alter the past to turn his failures into victories. That's a really useful skill for him. Then we have Grimlock. He's shown, just like any of the other Beast Transformers in this line, in his Beast mode. He has the Solus Prime symbol attached to him on my card. So Solus Grimlock demolishes enemies with the Spark Breaker battering ram that he doesn't come with. Alright, we're going to do Grimlock first, and this is his torso mode. This isn't Volcanicus proper, because Volcanicus is supposed to be comprised of all 5 Dinobots. So this is 3/5 of that combiner. But it's a good way to show off, the torso mode that Grimlock utilizes. The Volcanicus head sculpt is very nice looking. It, looks like some souped up version of Grimlock with kind of a horned crown on his head. He's got a very wide upper body. A lot of people criticize that. Me personally, I don't mind it so much. I think it looks okay. He's got his little codpiece there, legs. He is not the most stable thing ever. He's a little rickety, mostly due to the very, very weak ratchet joints that control the forward and back motion in his hips there. There's ratchets there, but barely. So the 2 extra hand pieces that go to his legs, they can be utilized in 2 ways in this combiner. The first way I'm going to show you isn't actually shown in the instructions, but it was demonstrated by the designers themselves. They're actually used to kind of fill out his torso, make it look a little more proportional. So the way you attach these things, got this little 5mm hole in his armpit there. You go ahead, plug this guy in. The front thumb bit doesn't really have anywhere to go. You just fold it in there. And then the rear thumb, there actually is a little slot. Barely see it there. But it's not actually big enough for this tab to go into. I don't know if that's a design flaw or if it's meant as more of a, just kind of a guide for the tab more than an actual slot for it. Do the same thing on this side. He's going to have one garish colored. Oh, and there goes the hand-on slug. Yeah, the hand piece on my slug, by the way, is very loose. It falls out of the hole pretty easily, so I don't know if that's an across-the-board thing, but it's a thing on mine. And lend you a hand. So that is one way you can utilize these pieces. For me, I don't feel like it looks very good. Like I said, I don't really mind his proportions as they are. Yes, they're exaggerated, but that's fine. He's supposed to be this very big, burly combiner that I just imagine has a lot of strength in his upper body. So I don't like this configuration, so I'm going to go ahead and use the more standard configuration for this line. Take these guys out carefully. Clear plastic is fragile, for those that don't know that. So I like to not stress it if I can help it. All right. Little thumbs around, point the little handle straight out. And then what you do is come along on the back side here, and there's a hole right in the back of the heel that you can plug these into. So you got that one in there. Then you get the second one in. And this configuration provides him with some added heel support, which for such a top-heavy combiner, I think is a necessity. Way more so than the superficial torso filling. And it enables him to take on much more dynamic poses without fear of toppling backwards. So, you can go ahead and... Got ankle tilt, by the way. Something the Combiner Wars combiners did not have. So, okay, for that. Yeah, my table's a little slick, so he's having a tendency to kind of slide, but you can see what I mean. He wouldn't be able to do that if those heel supports weren't in there, so yeah, I feel they add a lot to it. One last thing to point out, Grimlock is capable of interacting with his Enigma of Combination in this torso mode. The way you do that is actually bring his dinosaur head out and open the mouth. Inside the mouth you can see a little tab, or sorry, a little hole that the tab of the Enigma can plug into. Plug it in like this, make sure it's in there nice and firm. And there. Now he's got the Enigma showing in his chest. It does require you to have the, dinosaur head sticking straight out, which makes him a little less streamlined. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it doesn't really bother me when you look back at, other combiners like, say Predaking, who has a lion face just pointing straight out on his chest. It's not really a big deal. And again, it's optional. If you'd rather have the head just pointed down against the chest, that's up to you. But if you want him displaying his Enigma and kind of showing off his power, or, plug a Prime Master in there instead to give him some sort of power up, you can do that too. Next, we've got Starscream's Combiner Torso. I really like the look of this thing. I think it turned out really well. I think it's one of the more original torsos I've seen, utilizing one of the most original transformations I've ever seen for a Combiner Wars style torso. I'm just going to get the bad part over with. He kind of suffers the same issue that Combiner Wars Optimus Prime and the early run of Motormaster did, that the ratchets and his hips here are kind of offset in a way to where his legs are either pressing together awkwardly like they are now, or they have to be spaced apart, giving him a really wide stance. And considering he's already a very wide torso, oh my lord, this thing. I'm going to redo my review on Slug and just tell everyone it's really terrible, because it's starting to frustrate me to no end. But yeah, so those are kind of the choices you're left with. Either he looks like he's doing the pee-pee dance, or he is playing point guard, trying to get the ball for him. You know what? I'm not even going to acknowledge this thing falling off anymore. I'm not. I want my money back, man. The ratchets are really inconvenient. It's very disappointing because everything else about this torso I find to be just spot on and interesting. The problem is more severe on this table than it would be on a rougher surface, because his feet just tend to slide out from under him on this thing. It's very smooth. On my shelf, it won't be as bad. He does have his null rays stored on his back. Actually has the instructions call out for that. And you can see his Enigma is right there in the front, right in the center. That, unlike Grimlock's Enigma, actually is called out specifically in the instructions to put there. One thing worth pointing out, Starscream's Combiner doesn't have any known name assigned to it. His packaging doesn't give one to us, and his instructions don't even name the Combiner. They just say, combine to form Super Robot. No name attached whatsoever. And this is different from Grimlock, because on his instructions, it actually does call out his combined form as Volcanicus. What this means, I'm not sure. I don't know if it was an oversight, or if the Combiner just isn't meant to be a new entity. It's purely just an upgrade for Starscream. He just takes control of the bot, so something akin to Galvatronus. Some people have coined the fan names for him as, Emperor Starscream or even Mega Scream, in reference to the IDW one-shot where, Optimus Prime doesn't die in Transformers the movie, and instead of Megatron becoming Galvatron, Starscream becomes Mega Scream. As far as I know right now, it's just an upgrade for Starscream. There is no new name assigned to it, but if I find out otherwise, I will be sure to let people know. Overall, I like his torso mode a lot more than I like Grimlock's. It's much more solid. Grimlock's torso mode is just kind of a flimsy mess that takes a great deal of care to not just have topple all over the place. You're going to see a lot of cuts during that part of the review because the thing just kept flopping around on me. It's really frustrating. May have censored some language there. And that's everything I have to say about these two figures. So both of these toys has some really high marks and some really low marks. They have issues. There is a reason that so many people dislike them. From where I stand, Starscream's strength is his combiner mode, his torso mode. Grimlock's strength is definitely his robot mode. They got that pretty spot on. The torso mode looks cool, but is, like I said before, just a floppy mess. So while I am happy that I picked these up, and I am looking forward to completing Volcanicus and, giving Starscream more limbs as they become available, these aren't going to be for everybody. These are by no means essential figures to own. This is not the best Starscream toy. It's not the best Grimlock toy by far. You want the quintessential Grimlock, try to track down a Masterpiece one. That thing is pretty much perfect. If you can get the Hasbro one with the crown, even better. Really, these are only going to be good for somebody that really wants a Starscream combiner or a Dinobot combiner. This is probably the most negative review I've given so far. It's really disappointing. I wanted to like these more than I do. But, I think Hasbro and Takara really just, I don't know, they didn't give it their all on these. I think they just pumped them out because they needed to get them out there, and there could have been a lot more quality control. There could have been a lot of better direction taken on the design side. So, I don't hate the figures. They are far from my least favorite toys, but I am sorely disappointed because I know they could have been so much better. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it informative. Let me know in the comments if you plan on picking these two up, or if, this review has changed your mind either for or against them. And with that, till next time.